Well, hello there. I'm Kirifa Zachary, and you're watching All 24 News, world news program broadcasting to you live from the capital Algiers. To the headlines. The Algerian Army Gazette praises the country's diplomatic efforts, calling Algeria a strong and honest voice for Africa. It says the army is ready to protect national unity and stability. Next, in Syria, the army halts operations in Aleppo Sheikh Maqsoud after taking control. At least 23 people are dead, over 100 wounded, and many more are fleeing amid fears of further violence. Also in our news, in Sudan, El Burhan promises a quick victory over the Rapid Support Forces. Government forces regain control of Kaleib in North Kordofan, blaming outside parties for a major conspiracy. And later on in France, the government hints at early legislative elections next March, accusing the opposition of opportunism. Meanwhile, the central bank warns of a complex crisis tied to the public deficit. The details are right up. Welcome back to the details. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, the Algerian Army Gazette is highlighting Algeria's marathon diplomatic efforts on the world stage. During its recent term on the UN Security Council, Algeria pushed tirelessly for just causes, speaking out against the genocidal war on Gaza, calling for a Palestinian state with Al-Quds as its capital, and defending the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination.
With the end of 2025, Algeria concluded its term as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. Algeria was the voice of truth and justice, advocating for the Palestinian cause and sparing no effort to mobilize the international community to end the barbaric Zionist aggression against the Gaza Strip. Our country has also continued to defend the Sahrawi cause and the right of its people to self-determination. It has also exposed the ongoing violations of the Moroccan occupation, which disregards international conventions.
The Algerian Army Gazette says during its time on the UN Security Council, Algeria was a strong and honest voice for Africa. The country worked hard to promote security and development, hosting regional events that left a positive mark across the continent and benefited its peoples.
Algeria has been a strong and sincere voice in serving Africa's interests and aspirations, strongly denouncing the marginalization of this continent and calling for the need to redress this historical injustice, while continuing to advocate for the unification of African ranks.
And on the same occasion, the Algerian Army Gazette reaffirms that the army is fully prepared to protect Algeria's unity, security, and stability. Its January editorial highlights efforts to boost operational readiness and combat capabilities while safeguarding the nation and its citizens' peace. The Gazette also stresses the importance of national cohesion and warns against internal and external actors spreading false crises or misleading rhetoric. Reflecting on 2025, it calls it a year of solid achievements under President of the Republic Abdelmajid Tebboune, insisting that any attempts to derail Algeria's progress or its Renaissance project are bound to fail, thanks to the vigilance and awareness of the Algerian people.
This is evidenced by the qualitative result it achieved last year at various levels, particularly in the fight against terrorism and organized crime and in securing the borders. This result attests to the permanent readiness of our armed forces throughout the country to thwart all attempts aimed at undermining the security of our homeland and our people and to preserve national sovereignty.
Moving on to other developments now, and as you followed in our headlines, the Syrian army has halted operations in Aleppo's Sheikh Maqsoud neighborhood after taking full control following clashes with the SDF. Kurdish fighters are reportedly being moved to Tabqa. The army is calling on remaining armed elements to surrender safely while security forces are deploying to protect civilians, safeguard property, and restore order in coordination with military units. The governor of Aleppo says 6 people were killed and more than 60 wounded in clashes between Syrian army forces and the SDF. He accused the group of blocking civilian evacuations and using residents as human shields, making an already difficult humanitarian situation even worse.
Unfortunately, we are witnesses practices by Qasd that recall the criminal methods of the regime's forces, including the intimidation of civilians and serious violations of their rights. Over the past 2 days, civilians have been used as human shields and prevented from leaving through the safe corridors announced by the operations authority. These actions are unacceptable and do not represent Syria or the Syrian people.
Meanwhile, the Syrian Ministry of Health reports that attacks by the SDF in Aleppo since last Tuesday have killed 30 civilians and wounded 104. Among the dead are a child, 4 women, and a student killed by sniper fire, while many of wounded, mostly women and children, are in critical condition. In the same context, the governor of Aleppo says the curfew in key areas will stay in place until further notice. Authorities are working on the ground to restore security and normal life in the Sheikh Maqsoud and Ashrafiyya neighborhoods. Meanwhile, the Syrian army is dismantling booby-trapped vehicles left behind by the SDF. On a related note, the governor of Aleppo says clashes in the Sheikh Maqsoud and Ashrafiyya neighborhoods have displaced around 155,000 people. Many have moved to other parts of Aleppo city and nearby areas as local services work to support those affected. Elsewhere in the Middle East, 3 Palestinians have been killed by Zionist fire across the Gaza Strip, and another violation of the ceasefire. Artillery and airstrikes hit neighborhoods in the Tufah, Zaytun, Jabalia, east of Khan Yunis, Rafah and Deir al-Balah, leaving several others injured. Meanwhile, an infant has died in Deir al-Balah in Gaza due to extreme cold and the ongoing Zionist blockade. Recent storms have destroyed thousands of temporary shelters, and authorities warn that every storm becomes a humanitarian disaster because reconstruction is blocked and building materials cannot enter. It's been 3 months since a U.S. brokered ceasefire in Gaza meant to stop fighting, allow the withdrawal of forces, and enable reconstruction. But the truce has repeatedly been violated. The violence continues, leaving reconstruction and recovery out of reach for Palestinians. Sarah Ferjani reports now.
It's been exactly 3 months since Palestinians and Zionist forces agreed to a truce in Gaza. The ceasefire, brokered by the United States, was designed as a multi-phase plan. An initial halt to hostilities, followed by the withdrawal of occupation forces from the Gaza Strip, then the reconstruction of the enclave, the reopening of border crossings, facilitating the movement of people and goods. However, despite the agreement, Gaza has been repeatedly bombarded and continues to be under heavy fire. Displaced Gazans are still suffering in the fragile makeshift tents that they secured strongly on the ground.
We are suffering here. Whoever looks at the tents thinks that we have a good life, but the reality inside the tent is different. The tent is not sheltering us, not even against a raindrop. Life here, there is no life. We are deceiving ourselves if we say we are alive. This tent that you see is not doing anything against the water.
The first phase of the plan called for a 6-week ceasefire, during which Zionist forces were to withdraw from all populated areas of the Palestinian territory, pending a permanent ceasefire. Once again, the agreement has been violated. Early today, occupation forces positioned in eastern Gaza City opened machine gun fire east of a Tufah neighborhood, while an occupation army helicopter simultaneously targeted areas east of Jabalia in the north.
My daughter went to visit her sister, the married one. Less than an hour later, they hit their tent, and she was killed with her nephews. A boy who was 7 and the other was 5. What safety is this? What truce? In Mawassi Khan Yunis, this is claimed to be the safe area, meant to be the safe area.
In the central Gaza Strip, east of Deir al-Balah, Zionist fighter jets bombed a residential home. Occupation vehicles also resumed fire north and west of Rafah, as well as east of Khan Yunis in the south of the enclave. Since the start of the war on Gaza in October 2023, this marks the third attempt at a truce following those in November 2023 and January 2025, another fragile ceasefire that has failed to offer Palestinians the space to rebuild physically or emotionally amid a deafening international silence.
Moving on to a different story now. Iran's Revolutionary Guard says protecting the country's achievements and security is a red line. Amid the ongoing anti-government protests, the IRGC pledged to safeguard national interests, strategic infrastructure, and public property, while urging citizens to stay alert against what it calls enemy plots. On a similar note, Iran's UN ambassador blamed the Security Council and the United States for turning peaceful protest into widespread violence and vandalism. Amir Saeed Ervani also accused Washington and the Zionist entity of destabilizing actions, saying any conspiracies against Iran would be thwarted by its people. The United States dismissed these claims as baseless, calling them a diversion from the serious internal challenges facing the Iranian regime, according to the State Department.
A satanic conspiracy being plotted by the United States and the Zionist regime to fragment Iran and ignite an internal civil war will be thwarted through national solidarity between the Iranian government and people, and its shame will remain upon them.
Moving on to another topical development, Sudan's Sovereign Council head Abdel Fattah al-Burhan promised a near victory over the Rapid Support Forces. Speaking in Omdurman, west of Khartoum, he said the RSF has harmed all Sudanese and vowed to restore citizens' rights and eliminate the rebels soon.
This enemy has harmed everyone in the country in one way or another and commits grave abuses against the people. The army is fighting with full support of the Sudanese people who stand behind us and alongside us. We assure you that victory and the defeat of the rebels are very near. We can already see it approaching.
Meanwhile, the Sudanese army says it has seized control of Kuleyb in North Kordofan, freeing dozens of civilians, mostly women and children. The army also says it downed an RSF drone over Al Ubaid. Last week, intensive air and ground operations targeted RSF positions in Kordofan, Darfur, and routes to southern Libya. The army reports destroying over 240 RSF vehicles, killing hundreds of fighters, and dismantling strategic drones, hideouts, and stations at Nyala Airport. The Sudanese government, for its part, is accusing what it calls external parties of plotting a major conspiracy against the country. The Minister of Culture and Information says the Army's destruction of 240 RSF vehicles shows that the Rapid Support Forces didn't act alone, but followed a planned agenda aimed at undermining the government, seizing control, and prolonging civilian displacement.
The Sudanese government says a recent statement by the Sudanese Armed Forces detailing military operations carried out over the past week confirms that 240 combat vehicles belonging to the militia were destroyed and that heavy casualties were inflicted on fighters and mercenaries linked to the Daglu family. According to the statement, this leaves no doubt that the rebel Rapid Support Forces did not act independently from the outset. Instead, their actions followed a coordinated and organized plan designed to serve external agendas aimed at undermining state authority, seizing control of the country, and prolonging the displacement of civilians in order to replace them with new populations.
The Sudanese Minister of Culture and Information says the government has evidence showing foreign involvement in funding and supplying militias, helping them continue their attacks on civilians and attempting to weaken the state.
The Sudanese government possesses substantial evidence confirming the involvement of external actors in managing, financing, and supplying this criminal militia, as well as providing it with logistical and military support, including the recruitment of foreign mercenaries. This support has enabled the militia to continue its criminal war against the unarmed population and attempt to weaken the state in a manner similar to what has been carried out in other countries in the region.
To another development, this time in Europe. The French government may dissolve the National Assembly if upcoming no-confidence votes passes amid a budget deadlock. Prime Minister Lecornu says opposition parties are blocking talks for political gain. Let's get more details with Karim Mustafawi.
The political scene in France seems to be getting more and more tense. The French Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu has asked Interior Minister Laurent Nunez to prepare for early legislative elections, which could be held alongside municipal elections in March 2026. Lecornu's request comes as the government faces two non-confidence motions from the far-right National Rally and the left-wing party La France Insoumise, amid ongoing tensions over the EU-Mercosur trade agreement.
Je vous remercie.
For us, a popular vote is not just a formality. It obliges us to respect the rules of democracy. If elections are viewed solidly through the lens of will we win or not, then there is no point in speaking about democracy at all. In democracy, we accept the will of the people. That is the fundamental principle. I have nothing more to say to them. Let them have the courage to face the voters, and then we will see who will support Macron. If they want to run in the elections, they should do so. But what we are witnessing today is a fear of submitting to the will of the people.
In response to these motions, Lecornu has toughened his tone toward both parties. He accused the far right and the left of deliberately blocking budget debate.
To table a motion of censure in the context is to deliberately choose to display internal political disagreement. This motion of censure further delays budget discussions already blocked by the same political parties against the backdrop of the electoral agenda and sends a very bad signal abroad.
With the clock ticking, the possibility of early elections is becoming ever more real. It is worth noting that both motions are set to be debated in the National Assembly next week.
And in the meantime, the governor of the Bank of France, François Villeroy-de-Galhau, warned that the country risks severe economic and generational strain due to the public deficit. Speaking of France and terror, he stresses the need for an urgent political settlement on the budget to bring the deficit down to 5% of GDP this year.
France today is facing a real multidimensional suffocation, institutional, economic and generational one too, while prioritizing the interests of the elderly over those of the young by expanding retirement spending and widening the deficit, a path that is no longer sustainable. It is time to move beyond bidding wars, political conflicts and narrow policy offers and toward genuine compromises that could help rescue the country and restore balance that is urgently needed.
The governor of France's central bank warned the country could slip into the red zone due to sharp economic corrections amid a turbulent geopolitical environment. Let's take a listen.
It is essential to have a 2026 budget that caps the deficit at 5% of GDP in order to avoid pushing the country into the red zone, an area that financial markets are now watching closely. This apparent calm should not be taken for granted. It is not permanent. Sharp corrections could occur at any moment, particularly in a highly volatile geopolitical environment.
And in other news, Russian authorities said Kiev launched a drone attack that sparked a fire at an oil depot in the Oktyabrski district of southern Volgograd. The region's governor, Andrei Potcharov, says no one was injured, but nearby residents were evacuated as a precaution while emergency teams worked to contain the blaze. Meanwhile, Kiev authorities say the city's electricity, heating, and water networks have gone completely offline after Russian shelling on Friday. The administration confirmed that the attacks also targeted the Qatari embassy. Emergency teams are working to assess the damage and restore essential services meanwhile. For its part, the UK has announced $270 million to support a potential multinational deployment to Ukraine. Defense Secretary John Healey, visiting Kiev, said the funding will upgrade vehicles, communications, and air defenses while ensuring troops are fully prepared for any deployment. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni is calling for a new European approach, urging the EU to reopen direct dialogue with Moscow while continuing support for Ukraine. Speaking on Friday, she said Europe must engage directly with Russia to play an effective role in the current stage of negotiations.
I believe the time has come for Europe to engage with Russia as well. If Europe chooses to take part in the current phase of negotiations by speaking to only one side, I fear its positive contribution will ultimately be limited.
And on the same occasion, Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has ruled out the possibility of a U.S. military attack on Greenland. Speaking on Friday in Rome, she said she doesn't believe Washington would take such action, adding that any military move would serve no one's interest and is not something she would support.
I continue not to believe in the hypothesis that the United States would launch a military action to take control of Greenland, an option that I clearly would not support. I've already put that in writing, but which I believe would benefit no one. I think it wouldn't even benefit the United States of America. To be clear, I think that the Trump administration, with its somewhat very assertive methods, is above all drawing attention to the strategic importance of Greenland and more broadly of the Arctic region for its interests and its security.
For his part, however, U.S. President Donald Trump says he plans to reach an agreement with Denmark over Greenland, vowing to achieve it by force or persuasion. Speaking on Friday at the White House, he said the U.S. would prefer a deal the easy way, but warned that it cannot allow Russia or China to gain influence on the island.
By the way, I'm a fan of Denmark too, I have to tell you, and you know, they've been very nice to me. I'm a big fan, but you know, the fact that they had a boat land there 500 years ago doesn't mean that they own the land. I'm sure we had lots of boats go there also, but we need that because if you take a look outside of Greenland right now, there are Russian destroyers, there are Chinese destroyers and bigger, there are Russian submarines all over the place. We're not going to have Russia or China occupy Greenland, and that's what they're going to do if we don't. So we're going to be doing something with Greenland, either the nice way or the more difficult.
In another news story, Venezuela says it has begun talks with the United States to restore diplomatic relations and reopen embassies that were cut off years ago. Caracas describes the discussions as an exploratory diplomatic process aimed at re-establishing missions in both capitals, with U.S. diplomats already visiting Caracas to assess reopening conditions. Venezuela says the move also seeks to defend its sovereignty and respond to recent events through peaceful diplomatic channels. And meanwhile, U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order to protect Venezuela oil revenues held in U.S. Treasury accounts, blocking any legal claims or seizures that could tie up the funds. The White House says the move aims to safeguard the money for diplomatic and policy purposes and support stability in Venezuela. Yasin Rikti has more.
After weeks of military pressure and escalating tensions, the United States is pivoting toward economic leverage in Venezuela, with President Donald Trump declaring the country open for business and urging major oil companies to return. In a high-profile meeting at the White House, President Trump called on U.S. and international oil firms to invest at least $100 billion to help rebuild Venezuela's deteriorated energy infrastructure, presenting it as both a business opportunity and a way to influence global fuel markets. Trump offered legal protections and total safety for executives willing to step in, emphasizing that companies would work directly with U.S. authorities rather than Caracas.
The plan is for them to spend, meaning our giant oil companies will be spending at least $100 billion of their money, not the government's money. They don't need government money. But they need government protection and need government security that when they spend all this money, it's going to be there so they get their money back and make a very nice return. The plan is for them to spend at least $100 billion to rebuild the capacity and the infrastructure necessary.
Meanwhile, major oil firms have responded with caution. ExxonMobil's CEO has described Venezuela as effectively uninvestable without major legal and commercial reforms, citing the need for durable guarantees before committing large sums. Chevron, however, the only U.S. major still operating there, indicated it would increase output, but full investment hinges on clear terms.
For more than a century, Chevron has been a part of Venezuela's past. We are certainly committed to its present, and we very much look forward as a proud American company to help it build a better future.
We haven't been in the country for almost 20 years. We think it's absolutely critical in the short term that we get a technical team in place to assess the current state of the industry and the assets, to understand what would be involved to help the people of Venezuela get production back on the market. With the invitation of the Venezuelan government and with appropriate security guarantees, we are ready to put a team on the ground there.
The Trump administration is framing control over Venezuelan oil revenues and production as central to U.S. strategic interests, aiming to limit influence from rival powers like China and Russia while stabilizing markets. Reuters reporting confirms that Trump has also taken executive action to protect Venezuelan oil revenues held in U.S. accounts from seizure as part of these broader economic efforts.
And we're dealing with the country, so we're empowered to make that deal. And you have total safety, total security. One of the reasons you couldn't go in is you had no guarantees, you had no security, but now you have total security. It's a whole different Venezuela, and Venezuela is going to be very successful. And the people of the United States are going to be big beneficiaries because we're going to be extracting, numbers of, in terms of oil, like few people have ever seen, actually. So you're dealing with us directly. You're not dealing with Venezuela at all. We don't want you to deal with Venezuela.
As Washington courts industry investment, the oil giant's lukewarm response highlights deep commercial and legal uncertainty. With huge reserves on the line, but major hurdles still unresolved, Venezuela's oil revival and its role in global energy markets remains far from assured.
And finally, it is time to catch up on more international news stories in the News in Brief with Sofiane Kenturi. Let's follow.
Somali President Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud said his government is pursuing diplomatic and legal efforts to counter foreign interference and protect Somalia's unity and territorial integrity in coordination with international allies. Naval vessels from China, Russia and Iran arrived off the South African coast on Friday to take part in joint naval drills under the Will for Peace 2026 exercise. South Africa described the initiative as strengthening BRICS Plus maritime cooperation. Morocco's Action Group for Palestine held a protest outside parliament against a joint military plan between Israel and the Moroccan army. Protesters vote to continue mobilization against what they call Zionist normalization in Morocco. North Korea accused South Korea of violating its sovereignty, saying it shot down a South Korean drone that entered its airspace and warned Seoul against further provocations.
And with this, dear viewers, we reach the end of tonight's news. To catch up on anything you missed or get the latest updates, head over to our social media channels as well as our website. From all of us here at All 24 News, I'm Karim Zachary. Thanks for watching and do take care.